What we have at the top of this page is the law of cosines. It looks like a very complicated formula, but it's fairly straightforward to use, and that's the main goal of this video, is to show you how to use it correctly. Now, if you understand where it came from the last video, that's great. But the main thing that I want you to understand from that video is we really only use this in a side-side-side relationship or a side-angle-side relationship, or you'll notice when the law of sines won't work, this is our next go-to. So this is always kind of a last resort for problems. So look at the example that I have here, and I'm looking for mn. So I'm going to call that x. And what I see is when I try and do the law of sines, I have x over the sine of 104. That's fine. But I do not have an angle that I know opposite of 29. And I do not have an angle opposite the 48 that I know. So I don't know enough angles or enough sides to figure out that missing side of x using law of sines. So that's how I know I'm going to try and use law of cosines. And if you look at this, this is the side followed by the angle followed by the side relationship that also kind of clues me in that I'm going to use the law of cosines. So let's start with what we're trying to find. We're trying to find a side x. If you look at the law of cosines, a squared, b squared, c squared, those all represent the sides of the triangle. And the capital letters A, B, and C represent the angles. So since we're looking for a side, I'm going to use that first formula that says the side squared should equal b squared. Now my other two sides, if that's A, according to the formula, the other two sides of the triangle would be B and C. So it's going to equal b squared, which would be 48 squared, plus c squared, which in this case c is 29, minus 2 times b, which again is 48, times c, which again is 29, times the cosine of angle A. And angle A is what I have, because remember A and angle A are always opposite of each other, so times the cosine of 104. Now the tricky part, and the part that I need you to be very aware of, is everything from the 2 on is one number. 2 times 48 times 29 times the cosine of 104. All of that multiplying should happen before the subtraction and the addition. So when I go to my calculator to type this in, what I'm going to get is, and I'll do this in steps so you can see it, 2 times 48 times 29 times the cosine of 24, and I'm getting a really big number here. I'm getting 2543.3105554. So 2543.31. Now that's okay because you're multiplying big numbers here. And there was a minus in front of that. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the 29 squared because exponents happen, or really should have happened before all of that. 841 and 48 squared, which is 2,304. And there's a plus between those things. So now I'm going to finish saying what x squared is equal to. So now x squared should equal 2,304 plus 841 minus 2,543.310554. And yes, I'm typing all of that into my calculator to be as accurate as possible. And what I'm getting is 601.689446, but that's equal to x squared. So the very last thing I should do in a law of cosines problem when I'm looking for a side is square root that number because I want to get x by itself. So I'm going to square root that, and I get x is approximately 24.53. And now I look at the triangle and I see if that seems reasonable. I've got an angle of 104 degrees and a side of 48 and 29, and 104 is the biggest angle and 24.53 is not the biggest side, so definitely I went wrong somewhere in this problem. So I've got to figure out where that is. So let me see. Usually when a mistake is made, it happens in this part of the equation. So I'm going to type all that in again. I'm going to make sure my calculator's in degree mode, which it is, and I get 2 times 48 times 29 times the cosine of 104. And for whatever reason, this time I'm getting a negative 673.5105573. Now this is going to make a big difference. I don't know if I typed something in wrong, but that's the number I'm getting now. So now I need to go back and finish off my last 2 steps here. What's important to notice here now is I have this double negative between the 841 minus the negative 673. So that's going to turn into a plus. So when I take 2,304 plus 841 plus, because of the double negative, 673.5105573, now I'm getting a much bigger number. It's saying that x squared is equal to 3,818.510557. So when I square root both sides, now I'm getting 61.79. And now I look at my answer, and that seems reasonable. That's bigger than 29 and 48, and it should be the biggest side on the triangle because x is across from the biggest angle, 104. So the answer here is 61.79. So I hope I didn't lose you in my making a mistake there and typing things on my calculator, but that is usually the most common mistake. And I honestly made that, and I had to go back and fix it. So if you make a mistake and something doesn't seem reasonable, what I would go back and check is that last part with the cosine and how you typed all that in.